In the 2024 fiscal year, the United States will dedicate a staggering $883.7 billion to defense. Inching ever closer to the $1 trillion mark, America's defense budget remains the world's largest by some distance. Its nearest competitor, China, will only spend $236.1 billion in comparison, a number that the US budget more than triples. But here's the interesting thing about that budget, which often goes underappreciated. Not all $883.7 billion will go toward purchasing or developing new weapons. A large portion goes toward nations the US is supporting, such as Ukraine, but much of it is dedicated to simply keeping what the US military already has running. It's money used to pay salaries, keep planes refueled, and crucially, to ensure weapons have the ammunition they need when it comes time to enter battle. That brings us to the subject of today's video. The United States has one of the world's most powerful navies, with global firepower ranking it fourth in terms of total assets. That ranking is misleading. Though other navies have more assets, none have fleets that are as strong as America's in terms of size, weight, or weapons capabilities. And it's those weapons capabilities we're going to examine today, as we explore how much it costs for the US Navy to fire off the various weapons it has at its disposal. We start with the Mark 33. These enormous guns derive from the Mark 22, which was first commissioned during World War II as replacements for the 40mm Bofors batteries the US Navy had previously used. Those batteries had proven ineffective in stopping Japan's kamikaze attacks. The US Navy needed something that could fire a stronger shell capable of kill-stopping a determined attacker before they reached a vessel. Enter the Mark 22. Installed on destroyer escorts and similar auxiliary ships, the Mark 22 was capable of automatic fire, allowing it to shred incoming kamikaze vessels with 50 caliber rounds in an instant. However, the Mark 22 never actually saw service during World War II, due to the US diverting resources to a .70 caliber gun that served the same purpose. But it wasn't scrapped. The Mark 22 became the standard 50 caliber gun for many US Navy ships from 1948 onwards, and still remains in service to this day. It's been iterated on since, with the Marks 33 and 34 improving on the design by offering twin-gun capabilities. The Mark 33 is the gun we'll examine here. With a 150-inch barrel length, it's an imposing sight jutting on the side of any ship. The gun is capable of elevating to 85 degrees, allowing it to shoot down incoming planes and helicopters, as well as descending to an angle of -15 degrees when targeting something in the water. Its shells are equally impressive. A complete round fired from the Mark 33 weighs a staggering 24 pounds, though it's also capable of firing lighter projectile rounds that bring the weight down to 13 pounds. It's also a good long-range weapon. The Mark 33 hits its maximum range at a 45-degree elevation, at which point it can fire rounds at targets up to 8.29 miles away. That should give you some insight into just how powerful these guns are and how much it must cost to fire a single round that far. Even when elevated to tackle incoming aircraft, the Mark 33 can hit targets at elevations of up to 5.74 miles, making it an effective defense against any fighter jets or helicopters that move within visual distance. Now we come to the key question: how much does it cost to fire the Mark 33? Unfortunately, we only have estimates. According to Navy weapons, the HC Mark 27 Mod 1 is one of the 3 types of complete rounds that the Mark 33 can fire. While the US Navy isn't forthcoming on the cost of a modern HC shell, we do know that a single HC projectile cost $1,352 during the Korean War. Adjusted for inflation, that would mean an HC shell today costs $16,304.50. Now, consider the fact that the Mark 33 can fire between 45 and 50 rounds per minute. That means a 1-minute volley of 50 rounds could cost $815,225, a huge sum of money for taking out a single target. Let's move on to something a little smaller, the M240 machine gun. A medium machine gun that's capable of firing standard 7.62 by 51mm 50 caliber rounds. It's belt-fed and can be propped up via a tripod. It was introduced in the late 1970s, ostensibly as a replacement for the aging M60. Depending on which variation of the gun is used, it can weigh anywhere between 21.8 and 27.6 pounds, and it has an effective range of around 3,900 feet. And it fires fast. According to military.com, the M240 can rattle off rounds at a rate of 950 per minute, with those rounds being fed into it via 100-round bandoliers. Interestingly, the gas the gun generates from firing one round offers the energy needed to fire the next, creating a cyclical firing mechanism that allows for the near constant rate of fire the weapon achieves. It's also one of the more cost-effective weapons that the US Navy has in its arsenal. Midway USA currently sells 7.62 by 51mm NATO rounds for anywhere between 90 cents and $1.80 per round. That's ideal for the M240, which can burn through hundreds of rounds in a minute. If the gun is fired at maximum capacity for a full 60 seconds, expending 950 rounds in the process, its cost of use will be between $855 and $1,710. That's assuming retail prices. The odds are that the US Navy is able to buy ammunition in bulk, meaning it would get discounts that could bring the cost per round down significantly. Nevertheless, the M240, along with other machine gun variants the Navy may use that require 7.62 by 51mm rounds, is among the most cost-effective in the Navy's arsenal. However, it doesn't have a ton of stopping power, making the gun most useful when attacking human targets or punching holes in the hulls of small boats. How about we switch focus to something a little heavier? The 5-inch caliber Mark 45. This full-automatic naval gun was first designed in 1995, though it took another 5 years before the US Navy entered it into service. It's used on a host of ships, not all of which are part of the US Navy. In addition to being a standard gun installed into all new construction Arleigh Burke-class vessels in the US, it's fitted into the South Korean KDX-2 and KDX-3 classes as well. Japan also fits the Mark 45 in its Atago-class vessels, while Britain uses it for its Type 26 class ships. So it's a versatile gun, and that versatility extends into its uses. The Mark 45 can engage targets both on the surface and air, in addition to providing fire support for on-land operations. If the ship happens to have the Mark 45 Mod 4 gun mount upgrade installed, the weapon's usefulness is multiplied. Not only does it get a longer barrel, a 63 caliber, but it becomes even more effective as a land attack weapon. It also has a huge range. America's Navy says that a single conventional round fired from this gun can travel a staggering 13 nautical miles en route to its target. That obviously makes it useful for anti-air attacks, as that range allows it to strike slow-moving helicopters. Plus, the gun's range means a ship can station itself off the coast of a land-based target to offer support at a distance. The Mark 45 also has a large magazine capacity. The gun mounts installed on American destroyers can hold up to 600 rounds, with the versions installed on cruisers doubling that. They can carry up to 1,200 rounds on Mark 45 ammunition. Which brings us to the key question: how much does one of these rounds cost? The answer is an impressive $1,600 and up to $2,200 per round. Now consider this, the Mark 45 is designed to be an automatic weapon, with America's Navy saying it can rattle off between 16 and 20 rounds per minute. That means a single minute of constant fire costs between $25,000 and $31,000. A heavy price to pay, though it's one the US Navy is happy to foot given the Mark 45's extensive versatility. Let's switch back to naval machine guns, specifically the Mark 38 25mm machine gun system, which served as the direct replacement for the US Navy's older Mark 16 20mm machine guns. As the name implies, the gun has a single 25mm barrel, which is air-cooled and can be fired in both semi- and fully automatic modes. It's usually elevated on a platform, giving the shooter a greater view of the ocean ahead of them, and several versions come with an optional secondary function that allows it to also fire 7.62 by 51mm rounds. Those versions have a far higher firing rate, with the Mark 38 able to rattle off up to 500 rounds per minute when in fully automatic mode. Using our figures from earlier, that means a single minute of fire would cost between $450 and $900. But that's far from the most expensive use of the gun. Switching back to the standard 25mm rounds, the Mark 38 can fire those rounds up to 2,500 yards, giving it an impressive range, albeit lower than many of the weapons discussed so far. But that makes sense. The Mark 38 isn't designed to take on targets at long range. Instead, the gun is designed to allow a ship to defend itself against fast attack crafts and fast inshore attack crafts, both of which rapidly engage a ship with the intent of launching quick-fire attacks and, in some cases, boarding the vessel. The Mark 38 is employed on both direct combat and auxiliary ships, with its first appearance coming during the early 1990s in Operations Desert Storm and Shield. They're also somewhat portable. The US Navy maintains a rotatable pool of guns, which can be installed temporarily on a ship going out to an operation before being removed and replaced back into storage when the ship returns. Let's come back to the cost of the rounds it fires. The Mark 38 is a versatile gun that can fire several variations of 25mm rounds. Ordnance.com offers several of those rounds, including the 25mm NATO standard Oerlikon armor-piercing round. That's the one the US Navy would most likely use in combat operations, and it retails for $250 per round. Assuming the Mark 38 is placed in fully automatic mode, it can fire up to 180 of these rounds in a single minute, leading to a cost of $45,000 for a single minute of continuous fire. Thankfully for the Navy's balance and America's defense budget, much cheaper rounds are available for practice firings and training operations. For instance, the 25mm Bushmaster M793 target practice round is available for $65, reducing the per-minute maximum fire cost to $11,700. Still, that's a lot of money to be spent on a minute of testing. Next up is a weapon that the US Navy doesn't deploy itself. It's a bomb that's dropped from an aircraft, which may make you wonder why it's featured in the video. The answer is simple. The US Navy and US Air Force regularly work on joint operations, as evidenced by the fact that the US has 11 aircraft carriers. So a bomb dropped from a plane that launches from a naval vessel is as much a weapon as any gun installed on that vessel. This brings us to the Mark 84 General Purpose Bomb. Measuring 10 feet and 9 inches with an 18-inch diameter, the Mark 84 is a free-fall dumb bomb that has no inbuilt targeting systems. Instead, it's simply carried over a target by a jet and dropped, with the 2,000-pound bomb detonating upon impact. It combines blast and fragmentation destruction to devastate its target. According to the Joint Program Executive Office of Armaments and Ammunition, that makes it an ideal choice for soft or unarmored targets such as railways, rail yards, and standard buildings. As mentioned, the bomb is primarily used by the US Air Force. However, there are many examples of the Navy putting it to good use, with Operation Desert Storm being one of the most prominent. During that conflict, the Marine Corps, which is a division of the US Navy, dropped around 1,000 of the 12,000 Mark 84s used in that operation via tactical aircraft. Coming back to the bomb, it uses a Balut airbag that deploys from its tail when the bomb is dropped. That bag is essential. It slows the bomb down enough for a plane to escape the blast zone, even when the bomb is dropped at low altitudes. Now we come to the cost. This is where various sources differ in their estimation of the per-cost unit of the Mark 84. According to the Military Analysis Network, each Mark 84 costs $3,100, creating a pretty attractive price point for a powerful bomb that's capable of taking out a variety of targets. It can penetrate up to 15 inches of metal and 11 feet of concrete, with the bomb leaving a 50-foot wide crater if it impacts on the ground. Its fragmentation detonation also means that any targets within a 400-yard radius of the explosion are at risk of getting shredded by shrapnel. Speaking of shredding, that brings us to the Phalanx Close-In Weapon System, or CIWS. An M61A1 20mm cannon, the CIWS weighs 13,600 pounds and is among the fastest firing guns the US Navy has in its arsenal. Depending on which variation a ship has, the gun can shoot a staggering 3,000 to 4,500 rounds per minute when placed in dual-fire mode. Hitting the maximum 4,500 rounds would require a trio of magazine changes though, as each cartridge is only loaded with 1,550 rounds. According to America's Navy, the gun is designed to provide ships with inner layer point defense capabilities. That translates to it being an effective way to shoot down anti-ship missiles before they hit a vessel, with its rapid firing rate also making it a solid defense against encroaching aircraft. It's intended to take out targets that have otherwise breached a ship's defenses. If a long-range weapon doesn't take out a threat, it'll face a volley of bullets from the CIWS. It's essentially a Gatling gun made specifically for ships. As the name implies, the CIWS fires 20mm armor-piercing discarding sabot rounds, and there are 900 of these systems built into ships owned by 22 countries. That alone tells you how effective the gun is. It's not just the US Navy using it to defend against incoming threats. But how much does it cost to fire? According to the Warzone, the CIWS can fire off 75 rounds per second at a cost of $3,500. That brings the per-cost round to around $46, a veritable bargain given how much damage the gun can do at close range. For a full minute of uninterrupted fire that hits the 4,500 rounds per minute limit, the US Navy would have to spend $207,000. Suddenly, the per-cost round doesn't seem quite so reasonable. A $46 round may be cheaper than some of the others on the list, but when loaded into a gun that fires as rapidly as the CIWS, the Navy ends up spending a lot more than it would with other automatic weapons. Of course, we haven't covered one of the most potent weapons the US Navy has at its disposal yet. It's missiles. We'll start with the RIM-116 rolling airframe missile. America's Navy describes this missile as a lightweight and quick-reaction missile that's designed for fire-and-forget applications. It's a powerful line of defense for any ship. The RIM-116 is capable of tracking and destroying inbound anti-ship cruise missiles before they can reach a vessel's hull. It requires a solid propellant rocket for launch and weighs just 164 pounds. That light weight is what allows the missile to reach supersonic speeds, with those speeds making it an ideal choice for intercepting other high-speed missiles. It's typically installed on amphibious assault ships, carriers, and landing platform dock ships. It was also a cooperative development. The US and German governments combined to design the RIM 116, which entered active deployment in August 1999. Since then, it's been adopted by several navies beyond the US and Germany, with Japan, South Korea, Egypt, Turkey, Greece, and the United Arab Emirates all having versions of this lethal missile fitted into their ships. All told, the missile's designers, Raytheon, have made around 5,000 RIM 116s during the missile's life cycle, and they're making a lot of money doing so. The most recent per-unit figures we have for the RIM 116 come from the US Department of Defense fiscal year 2015 budget request. In that document, it requested 90 new RIM 116s at a total cost of $80.8 million. Basic division brings us to a per-unit figure of $897,777.78, demonstrating the huge gulf in per-unit cost differences between a conventional round and a missile. It's unlikely the cost has come down since the 2015 budget request, with the odds being that the RIM 116 costs even more today due to inflation. Of course, the RIM 116 is far from the only missile the US Navy has in its arsenal. There's also the RIM 162 Evolved Sea Sparrow missile, which is another missile designed to protect ships from anti-ship cruise missiles. However, the RIM 162 is a little more versatile than the RIM 116, as it can also strike against low-velocity air threats such as helicopters, in addition to serving as a surface-to-surface missile that can attack maneuverable threats on land. Like the RIM 116, its development was also a joint effort. In addition to the US and German governments working on the weapon, it was designed with input from Canada, Denmark, Australia, Greece, Norway, Turkey, Spain, and the Netherlands. All use it in their navies, as do Thailand and the United Arab Emirates. The missile is capable of reaching speeds of Mach 4, ensuring it can catch up to all but the fastest cruise missiles, and it has an impressive 31-mile range. If you're looking for it in a US Navy vessel, you'll find it in the Gerald R. Ford-class aircraft carrier, as well as a host of amphibious assault ships and both the Arleigh Burke and Zumwalt-class destroyers. All will have paid a heavy price to have the missile ready to launch. According to America's Navy, a single RIM 162 missile costs between $787,000 and $972,000, depending on the weapon's configuration. And the Navy doesn't skimp out when buying them. In 2016, Military Plus Aerospace Electronics announced that Raytheon, the missile's manufacturer, had received an order for 186 of the missiles, totaling $177.9 million. That would put the per-unit cost at the high end of America's Navy's estimates, with each unit averaging out to $956,451.61. So, those are the two powerful missiles designed to take out incoming cruise missiles. Next up, a missile designed to take out ballistic missiles. The SM-3 anti-ballistic missile is another defensive weapon, which the US can use to shoot down short and intermediate-range ballistic missiles. Force is the name of the game with the SM-3. Rather than being equipped with an explosive warhead, which could cause major issues given the payloads typically attached to ballistic missiles, the SM-3 instead hits a ballistic missile at force to prevent it from reaching its target. Its manufacturers, Raytheon, compare the force generated as equivalent to a 10-ton truck hitting something at a speed of 600 miles per hour. And yet the missile's purpose requires far more accuracy than this metaphor suggests. Raytheon likens it to intercepting one bullet with another. The SM-3 is part of the Aegis weapon system and holds the distinction of being the only standard missile designed to work in space. Again, that's a vital function. Many ballistic missiles are designed to launch into Earth's orbit before coming back down to strike their target. The SM-3 can meet those missiles in space, using a kinetic kill to disable them before they come back down. But how much does one cost to launch? It depends on the year the SM-3 was bought. In its 2018 budget request, the Department of Defense requested 34 of the missiles at a total cost of $624.1 million. That would create a per-cost unit of $18.36 million. However, the price appears to have come down since then, at least according to The Telegraph. It asserts that an SM-3 in 2024 would cost around $12 million. Either way, the US Navy likely considers this a small price to pay for the ability to take out ballistic weapons during the mid-course of their flight. The SM-3 represents a huge jump from the $900,000 per unit costs of the Raytheon's RIM missiles. But even at $12 million per unit, it's not the most expensive weapon that the US Navy can fire. That honor belongs to the UGM-133. The US Navy doesn't just defend against ballistic missile threats. It presents those threats itself with the UGM-133, which is part of the Trident program, being the most powerful of those threats. It's an intercontinental ballistic missile designed to be deployed from Ohio-class nuclear missile submarines, giving you a hint to the payload the UGM-133 can carry. It's designed for nuclear strikes. The missile measures around 44 feet and can carry up to 8 MIRV Mark IV or Mark V nuclear warheads for a total payload of 6,172 pounds. It uses a 3-stage solid propellant to catapult it to a maximum range of 7,456 miles. And the US has a lot of them. There are 20 UGM-133s installed in each of America's 14 Ohio-class submarines, meaning it has 240 of these powerful missiles available. Just how much does that collection cost? America's Navy has the answer. It says the UGM-133 has a per-unit cost of $30.9 million. Putting that into context, this means the US has spent $7.416 billion equipping its Ohio-class submarines with 240 of these missiles, with the great irony being that it will hope never to use them. They exist to maintain a nuclear threat, to let any other nation know that the United States could launch nuclear missiles that could hit them from under the ocean, giving them practically no chance to defend themselves. Perhaps now you start seeing why the US military budget has broken the $800 billion barrier. The sheer cost of these weapons is a constant hurdle the Department of Defense must overcome, with millions of dollars being poured into the US Navy every year to maintain both its defensive capabilities and its attacking threat. But what do you think? Should the US Navy be spending so much on the weapons it uses? Could the US stand to reduce its costs a little by seeking alternatives or simply not buying as many of these weapons as it does? Tell us what you think in the comments, and thank you for watching the video. Now go and check out why you should never shoot medics in a war, or click this other video instead.